Hey there, creatives. Thank you for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I am your host, Raina Lombardi, and I'm really excited to welcome my next guest, Susan Clark. She is an art therapist and author of the book DBT-Informed Art Therapy. I personally reached out and asked if she would be willing to be a guest on the show because I found her book to be so invaluable in my own practice and work with adolescents and teens. And I wanted to be able to talk with her and learn more about her and her practice and share her work with you. So I hope you listen and enjoy the conversation.
The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I'm very excited to welcome my next guest. Her name is Susan Clark, and she's the author of DBT-Informed Art Therapy, Mindfulness, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and the Creative Process, and also the editor-author of DBT-Informed Art Therapy and Practice, Skillful Means in Action, which just came out this year. Susan is an art therapist and counselor with 25 years of experience in the mental health field. She currently owns a private psychotherapy practice, WiseMind Counseling in Kent, Ohio, where she provides individual and group DBT-informed treatment to adults and teens. Welcome, Susan. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So, how did you get involved with DBT and bring it to the art therapy work that you were doing? How did that come about?
I was very fortunate to meet some people early in my career who had interest in DBT and also art therapy. When I was an undergraduate, I was originally an English major, and I always loved to write. And I wrote a book, a novel when I was 10 and thought I was going to be a novelist, et cetera, And as I got older, I got a scholarship to college, writing and literature, et cetera. But then when I transferred to another school, this was in the early 90s, I took a psychology class and it rocked my world. My life changed. But I still loved writing. And when I started working right after graduating from college, this was around 1996, I got a job as a coordinator in a community mental health agency out in Arizona. I was underqualified for it, but I got it because I had done a little bit of volunteering for the agency. And they gave me quite a bit of leeway. So I was running groups. I was running, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes here, art therapy with a woman who was a couple decades older, who was getting master's training in art therapy. This was a few years after Marshall Linehan's DBT manual came out, so it was still very novel.
Mhm.
People were excited about it. And so we were playing around with that a little bit too. Jeannie Mel, the lady that I just mentioned, who was doing her art therapy work and training, wrote her thesis on combining art therapy and DBT.
Okay.
Yeah. And so as soon as I found out about DBT, I fell in love. I followed her around like a puppy dog, learned everything that I could. And when she left the agency, I took over that group. And a couple years later, I was in an art therapy program as well, did some skills training. I was fortunate enough also to get some skills training from Marsha Linehan, because at that time in the mid 1990s, she was still doing trainings herself.
That's amazing.
Some of them, yeah. So I was in Arizona at the time and went to Phoenix. She was doing a 2-day workshop on DBT skills training with Sherry Manning, who's another very well-known DBT person. And so things just kind of happened organically. And I was lucky enough to find these opportunities and kind of grab them when I could.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was
So
lucky.
yeah, and really interesting too that you started working in the field before you were in your graduate training program too. So you were getting all of this rich
Mhm.
experience, um, which I'm sure helped in graduate school too.
Yes, it helped, and it was in some ways a hindrance because I had one supervisor at the mental health agency for the first year who was great. And then as my career in the mental health agency continued, because I continued, I was there for about 5 years in graduate school and before, uh, sometimes I was just sort of left to the wolves, as they say, where there wasn't a lot of supervision after that one individual. And it was just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. Thankfully, I was lucky. I continued to be lucky. I was competent enough that I didn't do anything too horrible.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
But I have lots of stories and I learned a lot. And I did see over the course, especially when I was doing a skills training group, we didn't have comprehensive DBT or anything like that. But the skills training group was very helpful to several of the clients. So I wish we could have offered more. I wish I had had a lot more experience at the time, because I'm sure it would have been much more effective for the clients. And yet it still helped several people.
Sure.
So grateful
I'm
for that.
I'm sure. Yeah. And it sounds like it was influential enough that it it is still part of your practice today that
Mhm.
you've just continued to learn and grow in that capacity. What do you think makes the art therapy approach to integrating some of the DBT skills so accessible to clients?
Many of the clients that I have worked with over the years, and many of my colleagues, if not most, who have had similar experiences to me, agree with this that they, whether they have borderline personality or not, they're often very, very, very creative people,
Mm.
emotionally sensitive, intuitive, and many of them gravitate to alternate ways of expressing emotions, thoughts, states of mind, etc. And many of them are artists to one degree or another, or find out along the way that they're artists.
Mm.
So the personality construct of people who tend to need and benefit and respond to DBT, there seems to be just a good fit, a good mesh. And I also think, much more simply, essentially, people have all different ways of learning. And there are many, many non traditional learners out there who aren't necessarily going to respond so well to the didactic handout and worksheets.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I love the being able to integrate both together, right? So that people have both of the options. They have the worksheet to refer to, but they also have the experience of creating to gain a deeper understanding of what all those concepts mean to them and how can they utilize them in their daily life.
Absolutely. Yeah. They really, especially with some of the concepts like dialectics and radical acceptance. I mean, that stuff is so esoteric, you know? And so being able to have some kind of personal metaphorical connection to it and like, oh, yeah, this is what it means for me. It goes so much deeper.
I know like I'm a therapist and I love your book. And that was one of the reasons I reached out to you. And I also love DBT, but I'm not trained in DBT. I've done a lot of my own reading and used the skills training manual, worksheets and stuff with clients. But I've not done a big formal training. What would you say is kind of typical? I know that there is the Marsha Linehan program, but I've seen a lot of other trainings on DBT. Does it matter? Do you have to do one program to be able to market yourself as being DBT trained?
Good question. Yeah, there's quite a bit of controversy about that right now, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Without getting too political, I will say that there is a schism, especially between Marsha Linehan's group. And she actually several years ago started putting together her own certification process. And it's through an organization called the Linehan Board of Certification. And they offer certification for individual DBT counselors, therapists who are doing DBT. And the requirements for that are very rigorous and pretty expensive too. But it's wonderful because you learn the DBT and you are able to demonstrate that you know all of the components, all of the bells and whistles of the treatment that has actually been proven effective in all those randomized clinical trials, right? So it's great. And it's not accessible for everybody. Not everybody would want to do that. I'm honestly still on the fence whether I want to do that or not. There is one in particular that is an alternative to that, and a few others that I know of. I'm not going to say that they are good or bad. There's controversy around some of them and things that have happened and even legal battles that have transpired.
Oh my gosh.
But I tend to be, I'm not affiliated with Marsha Linehan. I'm not getting any any perks from this, but I feel pretty strongly that if you can get training, even a 2 or 3 day comprehensive or workshop training in DBT from a place like Behavioral Tech that Linehan is involved with. There's also one called the Treatment Implementation Collaborative that's very good. There's the Portland DBT Institute. All of these individuals and organizations offer solid training that's based on the original empirically founded approach.
Nice. I was just curious about that. Given that we're in kind of a day and age where there's a certification for everything, but at some point there wasn't. And so
it's true. Yeah. And you can get a certificate by attending a workshop, and you might not even have to complete a quiz, but then there are even like treatment modalities like EMDR, the eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing, to really get certified in that. There are lots of hoops you have to jump through. And with the Linehan program, it involves taking a 3-hour test, just understanding the manual, and also submitting actual session recordings
Wow.
where they are analyzing you doing DBT sessions with a client, and they are rating you for adherence.
Wow.
And
That's
so you
intense.
really, yeah. So at the end of it, how adherent, how good essentially your DBT is, and whether you deserve the certification. So
Wow.
yeah.
So I know for listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with DBT,
Mhm.
can you explain what the definition of dialectics is, or in this case, dialectical behavioral therapy, how
Mhm.
Linehan has framed out this particular approach? And then I have some follow-up questions to that too.
Sure, sure. In a nutshell, dialectical behavior therapy was designed over a course of several years by Marsha Linehan. And her purpose, she originally wanted to work with individuals, mostly turned out to be women, who are chronically suicidal. That was her treatment goal, saving suicidal people, keeping them
Mhm.
alive, better quality of life, etc. But as she started working with them, she realized that traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which she was trained in her PhD program and was the gold standard for everything, basically, was not working with these people.
Mhm.
That's very change based. You're analyzing your thoughts and, doing this different, doing that different. And if you change these things, you're going to get better. Well, these individuals who are extremely emotionally sensitive, it turned out later she realized that many of these folks who were struggling with suicidality met the criteria for borderline personality disorder as well. These folks were so emotionally sensitive and vulnerable that the strong change focus in CBT was excruciatingly painful. They couldn't handle it. They didn't like it. They were dropping out of therapy right and left. So Linehan, who has had a background in Catholicism, at one point she wanted to be a nun in her younger years. She later discovered Zen Buddhism and became a Zen master. She started saying, okay, we've got to do something different. Change is important. If these people don't change their behaviors and learn more effective ways of coping with their emotions, they're never going to get out of the hell they're in.
Yeah.
But we got to do something different because this push for change is not working. So dialectical philosophy stresses this idea that there's always a organic tension in the universe. There's a thesis and antithesis, right?
Mhm.
And for many of these individuals, their lives are polarized. They really are in excruciating pain. They want to live better lives, and they're scared of giving up their behaviors. They want to
Yeah.
live, they want to die. Folks with eating disorders, which I've worked with that population a lot, you'll see that ambivalence as well. I
Yes.
hate this eating disorder and it's my best friend and I can't break up with it.
Yeah. So powerful. Um, mm, and difficult to
Absolutely.
break that, right?
Mhm.
So,
So over time, she experimented. She was at the University of Washington at that point already. And she talks in her memoir about how difficult that was trying to get the other psychologists and the powers that be on board to do this work. But at the end of the day, she was able to, over time, construct this treatment that addressed these issues. And so there are many, many techniques that it's like a dance. You push and then maybe you push back, you fall back. And you may use a little bit of a reverence when things are getting intense to kind of knock the client off balance a little bit. But there's a way you do that is kind and has that
mm,
that positive regard while still holding limits and
yeah,
expressing those limits when appropriate.
mhm, for sure.
So
Hey there, listeners. I'm just cutting into this episode for a couple of minutes to share with you some upcoming events that we have that I don't want you to miss out on. First, we're going to be reopening the Creative Therapy Practice Builder Mastermind group in 2022. And if you've been listening and you're ready to take action and create the creative arts practice of your dreams, um, and you want support around that, then this might be the group for you. We're going to meet 60 minutes 3 times a month, and we'll have 1 week be a particular topic of focus, providing some education and resources. And then the other 2 will be really focused on pinpointing challenges that you're having as you're building your business or growing your business. And we'll provide you with support around those and additional resources to support you to overcome whatever it is that's challenging you in the moment. The group is going to be capped at 10 participants, so it's going to be small and intimate. Even if we only have 5, it'll be a nice group, and um, we'll keep we'll keep going if there's only 5. And so, in order to sign up for that, you can head over to creativeclinicianscorner.com/mastermind dash group, and you can check that out there. If you are unsure of if that would be a good fit for you, that's totally understandable. That's why I have created a 3-night practice building kind of immersion workshop series, and I'll be offering that on December 7th, 8th, and 9th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that week. And each day we're going to be covering a different topic. The first day is going to be focusing on your dream practice visualization. We'll do some creative art making around that. The second night, we're going to be talking about money mindset and the shifts that will be beneficial as you think about your business needing to generate a certain amount of income. And then on the third night, we're going to be focusing on how you can really utilize your expertise as a creative arts therapist to be your strategy for marketing. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, that immersive experience is totally free and complimentary. I'd love for you to join me. You can sign up either by heading over to our Instagram feed, which is Creative Clinicians Corner. And there you'll find a post with the link to RSVP, or you can head over to the creativeclinicianscorner.com, and under the lab tab, you'll find the RSVP for the immersive experience there too. And I look forward to seeing you then. So, in terms of like treatment approach, how do you think it differs from CBT? Because in some ways, there are some reframing techniques and tools embedded in the model. But what do you think really sets it apart and makes it a little bit different?
The mindfulness training is probably the most significant. In CBT, there's that constant analyzing of thoughts and challenging them and experimenting with different ways of approaching thoughts and behaviors. DBT is a type of cognitive therapy, but that balance of acceptance and change and motivation and commitment is kind of throughout the whole therapy. where most people with CBT, they commit to it, and then there's a period of however many weeks where they're working on these things. And yeah, people may have ups and downs with their motivation, but it's fairly straightforward. With DBT, you have stages to the treatment, but you often have to go back to motivation and commitment, getting them to re-engage, to re-buy into what they've committed to. Because when you have somebody who's in a lot of emotional distress and they frequently slip into that state we call emotion mind, where the emotional dysregulation is so strong that they're not able to make logical choices and think of long-term consequences, and often are like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. You know, this isn't worth it.
Yeah.
um, the therapist being able to step back and using all kinds of techniques, and also just being really radically genuine with them. Yeah, this is really hard. And you made this commitment. And going back to that motivation and commitment, recommitment stage as often as necessary to keep the treatment going.
Yeah, that is definitely with that population of people is necessary. I work 2 days a week doing therapy groups at a crisis hospital for kids and teens, and been doing that a long time. And of course, see that, right? That I'm ready to do something different, and then a few days later, we're back in the same position again.
Yeah.
And I feel like because of what you were saying earlier about how it can be difficult for people to get certified in this approach because of how rigorous the training is, then it limits the access of providers out there to provide this approach. And there are a few in my area, but not many. And makes it challenging for clients to find what they need.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's frustrating because then they may go to a therapist who says that they're a DBT therapist, but maybe they attended a 2-day workshop. And so they don't have that depth of knowledge, and they may have the best of intentions, but the treatment is so complex that, if the client doesn't get better, then that's DBT's fault.
Oh, but that wouldn't necessarily be true, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
be easy for us to blame it on that, but yeah, no.
But it makes sense if a client is coming in and they're like, oh, this is DBT, this stuff's supposed to work, and then it doesn't work. And it's like, well, then DBT doesn't work, right? How are they to know? And so the Linehan group, I think, does a pretty good job of outreach and trying to at least explain to people what the differences are and what to look for when you're trying to find a therapist who does DBT. My hope or my wish is that there were more DBT therapists who were willing to take insurance, because there's so many of them that are private pay. Which for low income, many marginalized populations, they don't have access to it.
No, that's true. I feel I've done insurance. I recently became unpaneled with insurance.
Oh, wow.
But I was a Medicaid provider for quite some time, and but I had to get off of it for my own sanity, just because of the back end challenges of billing and reconciliation and all that stuff. I definitely appreciate that need to, we need people that accept the insurance. And I also appreciate you get to a place where, okay, I'm not ready. I'm not willing to do that anymore.
Yeah, insurance is a headache on the best days.
It really is. It
Yeah.
really is. So, what do you think makes the DBT Art Informed DBT Skills Group a little different than the traditional skills group if somebody were to attend one in
Mm.
treatment?
Well, as I mentioned in my first book, there are different ways that they can be done. When I was working for several years in an eating disorder clinic, I offered a DBT-informed art therapy group in their partial hospitalization program. And it was an hour. And I found that I couldn't smush everything into an hour. I couldn't do the skills training and the group. And so what they let me do, the art stuff, what they let me do is do skills training on Tuesdays. And then on Thursdays, I would come in and we do a very fast review of the skill that we covered on Tuesdays. And then we would spend the remainder of the session, that hour-long period, engaging in an art experiential that was based on that skill and that helped them practice that particular skill. That's one way of doing it. I know of a practice in California where the therapist, she's a contributor to the second book. She, yeah, Yvette Duarte of Awake DBT in San Jose. She's fabulous. What she does is she offers a DBT informed art therapy group as sort of an advanced group. Usually, yeah, usually the people will have one round of skills training, regular standard skills training under their belt. And then if they want to, they can enroll in the advanced group where it's mostly art therapy. They'll review the skills that the client has already received prior and they do art.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very fun. And I know you offer the skills groups in your practice too.
Yes.
Yeah. And how long do your groups last?
My standard DBT group, outpatient, is a revolving group. So I do not have DBT informed art therapy in that group. I run it with Linehan's manual, and it's about 24 weeks. We do
Okay.
two weeks of mindfulness in between the other 3 modules. So 2 weeks of mindfulness skills training. It's an hour and a half every week. Then we'll do several weeks of emotion regulation. When that's finished, we'll go back 2 weeks of mindfulness, then distress tolerance, mindfulness, then interpersonal effectiveness. And so individuals can come in during those mindfulness bookends.
Ah, gotcha.
And I'll be honest with you, when I first started doing the group that way, I was a little bit hesitant to have mindfulness taught in those 2-hour chunks. I wasn't sure if it would work. That was what was recommended. And that's not really what we did in the agencies that I worked at. But I find that it is really effective because a lot of people don't understand mindfulness, right?
No, it's true.
And so those first 2 weeks, it's all like Greek. They'll try it, they learn it, and we talk about mindfulness here and there in the other skills modules. But then at the end of that skills module, we retake those 2 weeks of mindfulness and then we do it again. So by the end of that 6-month period, they've had 6 mindfulness sessions interspersed.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it's like a layering effect,
Yes.
right? So I learn it, I'm starting to practice it, rehearse it, integrate it, and then I learn it again. And now
Yep.
I'm learning a little bit more and still have that opportunity. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
To build upon it versus just working with it for a little bit and then not revisiting it again. Yeah. So what makes the second book a little bit different from your first book? Your first book was really kind of laying out an approach for and advocating for how you can effectively integrate DBT with art therapy. In the second book, how is that different?
Great question. My goal for the first book, all the things that you said, absolutely true. I wanted to write the book myself because I thought I was in a unique position as an art therapist, but then also somebody who, I worked with DBT experts for many years, and I knew pretty deeply the concepts and the principles. And frankly, more so, at least at the time, than many or most art therapists did. So I felt that I could present it and give an art therapist or another interested clinician a handbook where if they read the first half of the book, they would get a pretty comprehensive understanding of behaviorism, mindfulness, why DBT works, what the concepts and main strategies are, so that then they would have that understanding and could apply it as they're going through and experimenting with all of the activities, the experiential activities, right? Now, even during the writing of that, I was mindful that this approach that I developed over several years is just one way of conceptualizing it. And a lot of knowledge, and I think that I presented things well, but I'm wondering about people like Jeannie and other individuals that I had never met who have been experimenting with these techniques over the course of however many years too. And that is why I really started researching other people who were doing similar things. And in that book, I had some interviews and with different therapists and asked them questions about how they were integrating it. And some of them even contributed a few experientials in addition to the ones that I presented. When the book came out, Jessica Kingsley, the publishers, because the book was selling well, they of course were like, "Hey, do you have any more ideas?"
That's not a bad problem to have.
No, it's not. I must be honest though, I was so burned out at the time. It's like, I don't know. Yeah.
A lot went into your book, and you can
yeah.
tell as the reader, you can tell.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like those reference pages. I mean, I did a lot of research. So what I said, and I talked to this about with my husband first, it was like, do I really want to do this? I did have an idea that sort of bounced off the interviews that I did in the first book. Like, it would be cool to have some of these individuals write chapters.
Yeah.
Have in-depth explorations of their approaches, have case studies. My initial conceptualization was to have it be much more expressive therapies focused too, which for a number of reasons ended up not happening as much. I mean, the second part of the book has bi and multimodal approaches, but they're predominantly visual arts therapy based as well, with a little drama and poetry therapy thrown in. But I wanted to get other people's points of view and try to expand this so that a reader might be inspired to explore this on their own, get training, maybe somebody who has a research background who would never really think of doing this would be like, oh, this might be a really interesting dissertation project. But at the very least, expand it beyond my own thing, my own conceptualization.
So it sounds like in this book, you're offering, in collaboration with these other therapists who have been using this work too, a variety of different experientials and interventions that weren't presented in the original text.
Oh yeah, it's so rich. there is an individual named Mary Wire who is from New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
And she approached me early on when I was seeking out contributors. And actually, I shouldn't say she, I should say they. I apologize for that. They wrote a chapter called Queering DBT. And it is all
Oh,
about how do you implement DBT-informed art therapy that does not alienate people who have gender differences.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And it is one of my most favorite chapters. There are other chapters that are really interesting. There's an individual in Australia that did work on visual journaling in a mental health clinic. That's very interesting as well. There are a couple of individuals, co-authors in the UK who work with forensic population, quite dangerous individuals with learning disabilities.
Oh, wow.
And so their chapter is a case study on a young man who had a horrible history of abuse, sexual, physical, etc. And they talked about how they coordinated the art therapy and this process of outlining one another's hands
Oh,
and doing
wow.
work with the outlines of the hands in conjunction with skills training that they were doing with him to work on the attachment stuff while they were also providing him with the
Very,
self-regulation stuff. Yeah.
very cool.
Mm.
I think everybody in therapy should be working on self-regulation. Like it just seems to be so needed. And I know like this particular approach was created to really address
Mhm.
populations that were a little more treatment resistant
Mhm.
for a variety of reasons, but it's so approachable and accessible to everybody, regardless. And the concepts of being able to, hold these two
Mhm.
opposing forces or entities or
Mhm.
systems at the same time, these dualities,
Mhm.
it's so important,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because we have to come into the gray, and but we can't deny their existence at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is about life,
Yeah.
managing the human condition. And if you want to get a little more esoteric, the nature of the universe, uh, and it's done in a way that is really tangible. These are life skills. I can't tell you how many times, and one of the other authors mentions this in her chapter, um, Jane D'Souza, about how clients will say, why don't they teach these skills in school? Everybody needs these.
I would agree. Why aren't we teaching these skills from the very
Right.
beginning of school? I think, could you imagine the difference in the
Mhm.
school environment that
For
would
sure.
make?
Yeah.
Huge
The good news, sorry.
for students and staff.
Right. And the good news is there are actually some programs that are beginning to implement DBT in some schools, but it needs to be expanded.
Mm.
I mean, there's an evidence base now for kids in inner city schools who get just basic mindfulness training. What a big difference it makes in their academic performance and also just emotional well-being. So, yeah, there
I
are a
love
lot of
it.
things to explore.
Very cool. So, do you have plans for another book after this one was just released? I know you just said like I was really burned out and I wasn't sure, but
This book actually burned me out more. It was a joy, but I must tell you, Raina, oh my goodness. Yeah. It took about 3 years from the initial idea to publication, which isn't that unusual. But when you're trying to recruit people to contribute to a book and have them do their proposals, and you often have to negotiate the proposals if it's not quite what's needed. And often people will, when they turn in their first manuscript, for a lot of reasons, their manuscript doesn't follow what they proposed. And sometimes that's not a big deal, but sometimes it really is a big deal, because it's like, okay, you said that you were going to do art therapy and poetry therapy, and there's just art therapy here, and we can't put it in the second section of the book because, it's not. So things like that. Life happens. People get sick. Sometimes I had one lady who ghosted me early on, and I sought her out, and I'm like, look, what's going on? And she's like, I'm really, really sorry. She said, I just realized that it was too much and that I had overcommitted myself, and I should have said something to you, and I apologize. And I'm like, that's okay. Yeah, it's like, we do it, So when you're dealing with so many people from various backgrounds, a lot of these individuals, lovely, brilliant, wonderful clinicians who haven't written for publication before.
Which is a different experience. If you've never been
absolutely.
published, it is a very different experience, and there's a lot of rigor that goes into it. I can't imagine doing a whole book. I've done a couple of chapters, and like the chapter I felt like was so painful,
I know. I really have compassion for my contributors, because the reason why I ended up doing the first book was because I was contributing a chapter to another book, and it was like, oh yeah, I can do this. Well, really hard. But yeah, just writing a chapter, it's a huge commitment. And depending on what's going on in your life and your experience with writing, even best case scenario, if you've done a lot of writing before, it's still a ton of work. So by the end of that, and we had people who came and went, and chapters morphed, and the final product was very different than what I had conceptualized. And I had to do some radical acceptance around that. It's like, this isn't the book I wanted, but it's a pretty good book. Well, it's all right.
I love that.
Yeah.
The DBT therapist is practicing DBT.
Absolutely. Therapy for the therapist.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, wow. So it makes me think of that there's like certain memes that they said it would be easier, right? They said it would be easier if you were the editor versus the only writer. A whole different set of problems and challenges.
Yeah, no, I'd go back to being a writer any day. And I do want to say that it was a great experience. And I got to know some very cool people from all over. Canada, Denmark, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, United States.
That's pretty amazing too. So I certainly think that being able to contribute to the literature in a way that's integrating approaches that are being used around the world and not just in our locale also gives another lens and perspective to the way therapists are working, which is really cool. And I feel like we are in such a fortunate period of time now where it's so easy to feel connected to other professionals from around the world, where when I first was getting started, I don't think there was that.
It's a different time.
Yeah. So very cool. Wow. If people want to purchase your books, where would be the best place to find them?
Well, Amazon, of course, always has the books. Depending on your feelings about Amazon, you can get that there. Also, Jessica Kingsley Publishers. They were originally an independent book publishing company based out of the UK, and then they also have a office in Philadelphia. They are now part of Hatchet UK, though. But
Oh,
if someone were wanting to look at the book, you could go on their website, Jessica Kingsley Publishers, and buy them through there if you like.
all right.
Yeah, and some independent bookstores that are still around that have a good psychology collection, you might be able to find them there. But
I wasn't sure if you had them available like through your website. I know some people will do
Mhm,
that somehow, but I can definitely put the links to both books,
mhm,
DBT-Informed
mhm.
Art Therapy, and then DBT-Informed Art Therapy in Practice. I'll put both of the
Mhm.
links to those. And where can people find you if they, wanted to learn more about your practice, or
Mhm.
perhaps they're in Ohio and they need to refer somebody to DBT? Where can they find you?
I am in Kent, Ohio. My website is www.wisemindohio, spelled out, .com. And so you can check out my website. I also have a Psychology Today profile. I do right now, I'm not doing full model DBT, but I'm doing highly, heavily DBT informed work. And I'm hoping to start a graduate group within the next 6 months or so for people who have completed one cycle of skills training that are interested in further exploring the skills through art therapy. So,
Oh, fun.
yeah.
Awesome.
So fingers
Awesome.
crossed on that.
Yeah, I hope that works out.
And as far as the book is concerned, if someone wants to email me, Susan at wisemindohio.com, they may reach out to me, and I do have copies of the book. I am more than happy to send them a book if they've come through your podcast at cost, and just paying for that and the shipping. So
All right.
either book, I'd be more than happy to give them a deal on.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, Susan. I really appreciate it. And I
Mhm.
hope listeners take advantage. And I know I highly recommend listeners, if you're interested in DBT, or you have been pulling some interventions off the internet that are DBT informed, get Susan's book. It's amazing. I've been using it the past few years, since it came out. I think maybe I got it in 2017, shortly after it was released,
Mhm.
and I recommend it to everybody.
Wonderful. That
It's
makes me so
awesome.
happy. Yeah, that was really my goal, to make this more accessible and increase the likelihood that people would have a better understanding of both approaches and how they merge. And again, like I said, maybe inspiring some people who are in the the ability to do research, to perhaps start building an evidence base.
Yeah, that would be
Mhm.
awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Susan. Um, I just am really inspired by her approach and her commitment to sharing that work through writing. And of course, if you listened, you heard. Writing a book is challenging, and it takes a lot of investment of time and energy and commitment to do. So I'm grateful for her and her work, and how it has helped me in my practice, particularly with adolescents and teens in crisis, and working with people struggling with substance abuse, as well. I've found that some of the DBT approaches have been really helpful, and those folks have been very receptive to it. So if that's something that you are engaged in within your own practice, I highly encourage you to check out her work and her book, which you can find in the links in the show notes. And also, if you're interested in working with me in 2022, I'm relaunching the Creative Practice Builder Mastermind group. And the goal is going to be to help individuals who are starting their private practice or who are very new into their private practice and looking for support to build it out. And so we'll be talking everything from finances to marketing to session structure, um, anything that pertains to creating and building out your practice will be open for discussion. And we'll meet 3 times a month for an hour each meeting. And one of the meeting will be focused more on like teaching and resource development. And then the other 2 will be more hot seat style, where each person has an opportunity to share a particular challenge that they're working through or that they need guidance around. And it could be anything from I'm writing copy on my website and I need some feedback around that, to how do we set up and structure a newsletter and create it into an automation so that it's consistent. Or it could be, how do we have those conversations on the intake call and not get carried away and lower our fees out of different feelings that might be coming up. All of those kinds of things would be open for discussion and support in the group. And if that sounds like something you might be interested in, you can head over to creativeclinicianscorner.com and you can sign up for a free 20-minute chat with me, and we can discuss whether or not, it feels like the right fit. And if you're unable to do that, but you want to kind of get an idea of what it might be like, I'm going to be offering a 3-day free workshop on December 7th, 8th, and 9th. And those will be an hour apiece, and they will be from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can sign up, you can RSVP in the Google form, and the link to that form will be in the show notes today. And if you are in a place where you can't access the show notes, the easiest way to go about that would be to head over to the website and sign up to be a subscriber to our newsletter, and I'll be sending out the form for that over the next 2 weeks as well. All right. And if that doesn't work, you can always email me, creativeclinician@gmail.com, and I'll happily send you that. I'll put you down for the RSVP and share with you the Zoom link. And we're also going to be live streaming those to our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/Creative Clinicians Corner. All right, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.